The 2020 presidential race has prompted a lot of discussion about election laws. Litigation attorney Bryan Tyson joins me from Atlanta to discuss this. Welcome to you, Bryan. Thanks very much for being with us. So because of the pandemic, more people are voting by mail this year than ever before. But President Trump has said that ballots that arrive after Election Day should not be counted. What laws actually govern that?
So each state has laws that govern when absentee ballots are received and when they're counted. And so for a lot of states, that is a 7 p.m. on Election Day deadline. Several states have extended that in light of COVID to allow a postmark deadline. And there are several states that have a postmark deadline for receipt. But the majority of states in the country have a 7 p.m. or close of Election Day type of receipt deadline. So voters need to be sure that they're getting their absentee ballots delivered tomorrow. Far too late to mail them. We need to make sure you get them in person to election officials tomorrow.
Yeah, a really important point. Well, the president has also said that vote tallying should be completed on Election Day, but no states ever report final results on election night. How long after Election Day can states continue counting votes?
States can continue counting votes up until the deadline for the Electoral College in December the 8th. So, for example, in Georgia, where I am, there's an initial certification deadline. It's about 10 days after the election for county election officials, and then a state deadline on November the 20th. So there's always time for military and overseas ballots to come in after the fact. There's time for election officials to resolve disputes about provisional ballots and how they handle questions about absentee ballots that might have been rejected or need to be cured. So there's always a process after Election Day that we go through of counting votes till we get to that certification deadline.
And is there a certain number or percentage of votes that states need to count in order to legally declare an official winner?
So there's not a magic number for each state. It's a plurality of who wins, and different states have different rules for how they allocate their electoral votes. But as a general rule, you're going to wait until the final certified results. And so it's important that on election night, you'll always see unofficial results on the numbers that are listed. And those calls that are made by the AP or by other news organizations are estimates based on the votes that have come in so far. But everyone has to wait till the official certified totals to know who actually won the electoral votes of that particular state.
Right. I think for some people that can be kind of confusing because these are, in fact, projections that are made by news organizations like CBS News, but the official results are something different. Well, you mentioned you're based there in Georgia, a state that has seen accusations of voter suppression in the past. What is at the basis of these claims, and what are election officials doing to ensure fairness?
So following the 2018 election, Georgia undertook a pretty detailed process of updating its election laws. And I think this is a process a lot of states have gone through, trying to modernize their voting systems, and COVID has really forced that at the forefront of a lot of pieces of the puzzle. The challenge is elections have to be governed by rules. If I show up on the Wednesday after the election, I don't get to vote, and it's not that I was disenfranchised, it's I didn't follow the rules to get there in time. And so there's been a policy debate in a lot of states of how do we ensure that there are clear boundaries around how we conduct elections, but also insurance against fraud, insurance against double voting, and then how do we deal with that in tension with ease of access. And so in Georgia, we've seen a significant changes to our election laws of making more options available for people with drop boxes, making it easier for election officials with early scanning of ballots. And so Georgia's made a number of changes along the way, but it gets back to that policy question of how do we ensure we have a clean and fair election while also making sure it's administered properly by the election officials who work so hard to get it right.
Well, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but I do want to ask you about a potential Supreme Court battle. During Bush v. Gore in 2000, the court halted a recount of votes in Florida. What would it take for the Supreme Court to get involved in an election?
So historically, we have election litigation right after the election is over about which votes are going to count. And the reason why that happens is for most states, once they certify their vote totals, it's very difficult to overturn the results of the election. And so where we may see a challenge is if we have, for example, votes in Pennsylvania that come in significantly after the deadline but are postmarked by Election Day, should those be included in the official totals? And I'd expect we'll have litigation around a lot of questions like that. Which votes should be included in the overall totals? If those are filed in federal court, they can make their way very quickly to the U.S. Supreme Court for resolution. And as we saw in Bush versus Gore, you can get into questions of what is the correct application of the law when we're trying to ensure we're counting every vote, but also counting every legal vote and not going beyond the boundaries and the rules of the road that were set up before the election began.
All right. Well, no one is hoping it gets to that point. We shall see. Bryan Tyson. Bryan, thanks very much for your analysis. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.